believe that what you do is not who you are, but
Okay.
who you are drives what you do. And this who you are, I believe, is the one core value. We have a lot of values, but there's one that we give away
Hmm.
in exchange for whether it's money, a college acceptance, or for an entrepreneur, a very successful business.
In business, it's important that we remember and align to what our brand strategy is. But today's Ask an Expert guest says it's equally important that we do the same thing for us as individuals. Hi, I'm Joshua Carlsen, co-founder of Propelo Media, and today I sit down with Rich Keller. He's worked with some of the biggest companies for over 25 years, such as Godiva, Kraft Foods, and Oreo, helped shape their brand strategies. And today he's going to talk about the importance of making a good first impression, because you only have 7 seconds to do that. So he utilizes a method called SCORE. It helps you stand out, overcome obstacles, and reach excellence, utilizing an individual one-word brand. Now let's hear what Rich has to say. Good morning, Rich. Thank you for coming on our Ask an Expert vodcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, we've got a lot to get into, but I want to actually go backwards in time a little bit. You have a long and tenured career working with some big brands from Oreo, Godiva, Kraft Foods, just to name a few. I wanted to just have you share a little bit about what you've done, building up to where you are now previously in your career.
Yeah, no, I started I graduated college as an accountant, which was probably not the best move for somebody like me, and that's part of why I do what I do today, which I'll get into. But 5 years in, I decided to go get my MBA at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in marketing and strategy.
Okay.
And I absolutely love brands. I love consumer products. I love studying behavior of people. And as my wife says, I could be in a supermarket all day if you just drop me off. And one of the things that I did in my career, in my corporate career, was I would craft the identity of a brand in one word.
Okay.
And this one word is what I call the core value. And the idea is that every single brand has one core value that they give to the world, because a
Sure.
brand is basically being purchased. So if you're in a supermarket and you're buying a product, in exchange for money, you're buying the core value. You're actually not buying
Right.
the product. You're
Right.
buying the core value.
Yep.
And in crafting the identities of these iconic brands in one word, I about 3 years ago decided to quit my career because I wanted to help people, especially entrepreneurs. I wanted them to do the same exact thing, because we're all actually brands. We're all being purchased, even though we
Sure.
don't want to admit that.
Yeah.
And I had this crazy notion from my son, because at 21 years old, he had no idea who he was.
Okay.
And what we really do as people is we have our identities caught up in what we do, and it's not really in who we are. And I believe that what you do is not who you are, but
Okay.
who you are drives what you do. And this who you are, I believe, is the one core value. We have a lot of values, but there's one that we give away
Hmm.
in exchange for whether it's money, a college acceptance, or for an entrepreneur, a very successful business.
Sure.
And so that's really what I do today, where I help people discover who they are. And then, really, with entrepreneurs, I then help them take this one word and infuse it as the identity of their
Right.
venture, because I believe that people buy human connection, and the entrepreneur is actually the brand, and what you're birthing like a baby is a venture, and you've got to turn that venture into a brand by giving it your core value. And that's what
Okay.
I do.
Okay. Well, let's talk about SCORE. You have an acronym, SCORE.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So when I decided to go on this venture, one of my main points was, what do I really want to help people do? And what I really
Sure.
want to help them do is stand out,
Okay.
conquer obstacles, and reach excellence. And I really truly believe in my heart, and based on my story, that when you conquer those obstacles and then you stand out, you can reach excellence.
Sure.
So I, as a brand guy, you have to, zhuzh it up into something that people are going to remember. And I just felt, and I really picked the word score because, number one, it's action oriented. Number two, there's many different ways that, score can be interpreted, whether it's a musical score or scoring a goal. I work with a lot of young adults, so they liked that in testing the word score, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean. And it was really a way for me to encapsulate what I actually give away, which is I give you this one word so that you can stand out, conquer obstacles, reach excellence, and score. And all it takes is one word.
Okay. And as far as coming up with this brand, what is the process to come up with this one word? I feel like we're all a composite of a lot of moving parts, a lot of memories, a lot of activity. Synthesizing it down to one word, heading into this interview seemed really daunting to me.
Yeah, and I love when people say to me, "So you're gonna really help me understand what my entire brand is in one word." Well, first of all, I'm a catalyst, and I'm wearing it on my shirt
Yep.
today, because I disrupt the way you think. That's basically around the concept of branding. But I want to give you
Okay.
an example. Let's do one together because I think this will help
Sure.
your listeners.
Yeah.
So I spent 7 years at Godiva, and for 5 years, we did not really fully understand who we were talking to. So I'm going to ask you, when you give a gift to your significant other, who is more important in the transaction, the gift or you or the person receiving it? What do you think? No, it's not a trick question. Who's
Person
more
receiving
important?
it. Person
Okay.
receiving it.
That's what we thought. And that actually is not correct. And the
Okay.
reason that's not correct, which is shocking because we
Yeah.
thought that, well, is think about it. If you give your significant other an engagement ring, they open up the box and they're, I mean, a mess. It is not what they wanted. Of course, they're upset, but you're devastated because you didn't get it right.
Right.
And so this concept of not knowing your recipient. So at Godiva, we were always talking to the recipient, but when we realized that it's actually the person coming into the boutique that we need to help get right, we don't need to
Okay.
know about the recipient. We need to know about your version of the recipient.
Okay.
So when we looked at, I fully believe that your story is critical to your brand. And when you look at
Sure.
the story of Lady Godiva, one of the things we realized in our research is that this brand's core value is generosity. You
Okay.
give Godiva, nobody really cares what's inside that gold box. Nobody spits out chocolate unless you don't like the flavor.
Right.
When you on Valentine's Day, when you give that box, you're actually giving a gesture of generosity because the recipient, without saying a word, knows that you care about them. You went out of your way, you spent money, and I must have done something to deserve this.
Sure.
So that concept of generosity now allows the brand to branch out beyond chocolate because we're not in the chocolate business. You're in the business of your core values. So being in the generosity business, what we learned is that we actually compete with other experiences, which
Sure.
opens up the entire brand game. So for people, what I've done is taking that learning from my corporate career for 25 years,
Yep.
I created a program where I came up with the best 9 questions. It's basically an exercise in introspection. I have so many people at the end say to me, I never really took the time to learn about myself. So it's really a lesson in learning who you are.
Right.
And then I do a series of exercises where you're circling words and grouping them and coming up basically at the end with a sentence about yourself that literally starts with I am. And I call it the coffee sentence because you would, in a coffee networking session,
Yeah.
share this sentence. But what I've also learned throughout my career in building this is that you have 7 seconds to make a first impression on somebody else.
Okay.
And so when people say, "Hey, what's your elevator speech?" and people are like, "I don't really know what does that mean and what do I say?" You have 7 seconds in that elevator, and in the elevator, when I say at my core, I'm a catalyst because I motivate, empower, and inspire people. Right there, that is very different
Resonates.
than saying I'm a marketer. Oh, I'm a marketer and I've been doing that. Or I worked at Kraft Foods, Cadbury, and Godiva. I'm not
Right.
really different than most people, but when I say who I am at my core, I'm actually sharing with that person that if you buy me, quote
Sure.
unquote, I'm going to disrupt the way you think. So the reason that this is powerful is because in my career, I can tell you all the brands that I didn't enjoy because I was babysitting. Like I'm not your guy if you want to put me on coke, I'm not your guy because I don't
Right.
want to babysit. I want to disrupt.
Okay.
So what it does is it helps people navigate their own world, which is exactly what I want people to do. I want who you are to go drive what you do, not the other way around.
Okay. So where can people go to get these questions or participate in this exercise?
Yeah, so my website is the richkeller.com.
Okay.
So www.therichkeller.com. I also on LinkedIn, anybody can DM me. I offer a free link to anybody that wants to speak with me. I do a free 1 hour call just to
Okay.
interact and get to know people. But basically, on my site, I have my program which people can purchase, and then what happens is after you're done with the workbook, I get it. I go through, I do it as well. Then I have a long chat with people, and I go through the word, and 90% of the time, I have a stronger word or a more higher order word,
Okay. Yep.
and that should be that way because after all the experience that I have, I want to help people get. So if you say to me you're a connector, that may be right, but I may have a higher word. Or you may say I'm nice, or I'm a good person, and I come up with something that's really powerful. But the goal is, and this is really important, the goal is, what are you selling? What are you giving away? Because that's really the definition of branding to me. We are supposed to
Okay.
be the guides, not the heroes of our story. So if we give away and help others win, the audience,
Right.
we actually win even more, because the whole point of a brand is for people to purchase the value. So if you're a person that
Right.
thinks like a brand, you're giving your value to a job, a college, a leadership position. And if you can articulate that and be consistent, because branding is all about consistency,
Sure.
then you're known for that one thing. It does not mean you don't have 10 other things. That's not the point of what I do. It's that, what is that one thing in 7 seconds that consistently you is your magic dust or your pixie dust, as I say.
Right. Well, so that was going to be my next question, which was, what do you say to the person that says, "Hey, you can't synthesize me down to one word," right? My pixie dust has got lots of different colors in it. What do you say to that person?
Well, first of all, I say to them, and I'm very honest about this.
Sure.
I'll give you your money back. Like,
Okay.
I'm not in this. Like this. I mean, I quit my career at 50. I walked out of a very successful career,
Yeah.
right on the spot. I didn't even tell my wife, and the reason for that is because I'm a cancer survivor. 26 years. I'm married to a 10-year survivor,
Okay.
and I want to change people's lives and give back before I go. And so what I say to them is, try me. I mean, the best way you can win this game is to have somebody say that and challenge you, and
Yeah.
I'll give it back to you, because I'm not one that doesn't want you to be happy in the end. But I will tell you, almost 2.5 years in, I haven't had anybody turn around to me and say, that doesn't make sense, because my definition of my program is, you give away this core value. Just like
Right.
Godiva gives away generosity, Starbucks gives away community, Apple gives away simplicity. When I share on stages what other brands are doing, that's when it clicks for people. They're like, you
Right.
know what? I didn't realize that Snickers is about satisfaction. Why? Because it's packed with peanuts.
Right.
And so what you're not buying the candy bar. You bought satisfaction at 4 o'clock. And that's the way I want people to start thinking, because you will break through the clutter so much quicker if you're in an interview and you're the 20th person and you start with, let me tell you what I actually am going to sell to you or give to you in exchange. The
Sure.
whole conversation changes. And that's what I do on stage, where I share the brands I studied or worked on, because that's when it clicks for people.
Well, so one of the things that I think is interesting is you talk about, the 7-second elevator pitch, and how big of a differentiator that is. And it instantly resonates. But you also talked about your son, how this
Yeah.
was part of the catalyst
Yeah.
that maybe got you into this. Why don't you talk about the experience you went through with your son to kind
Yeah.
of define what his personal brand was?
Yeah, so my son, when I quit my career, I didn't know what I was gonna do next. I had no idea I was gonna do this, by the way, when I walked out, but I thought back to 2 years before, the day that I resigned, and my son came to me, he was applying to college, and he said, "Dad, can you help me get ready for my alumni interviews?" And I said, "Of course. I mean, my profession's marketing." And
Right.
I asked him one simple question that really changed the whole game. I said, "Tell me about yourself." And most people will tell you what they do, they don't tell you who they are.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, "I don't even know where to begin." And I said, "Tell me anything." And he just started telling me, like, I'm a senior, I study, I play sports. And then he said to me, which really was the whole linchpin, he said, "Dad, they don't teach us how to answer this question in high school."
Right.
And what I looked at him and said was, at that moment, I said, "Listen, I have this crazy idea." And it was crazy. I said, "I'm going to help you get to this one word personal brand that you give away. looked at me like I had, 40 heads, but he worked with me and we came up with his one word, which was perseverance.
Okay.
And what's really powerful for my son and why it gave me the real, passion to go do this is when you apply to college, everybody thinks you have to solve world hunger. You got to have started 5 businesses, traveled the world.
Right.
This is a kid who went to sleepaway camp for 10 summers. And what I said to him when he figured out this one word, I said, listen, I want you to go up to your room and stand up and make believe you're talking to the committee. And I want you to share a story about how you bring this core value of perseverance to life. Because if you share the story, you're going to connect, show, don't tell. And he wrote an incredible essay about a campfire event at sleepaway camp. And he wrote about the moment he almost gave up. And it's a long story, which I won't get into, but he then got into Cornell University, which was his number one choice. And it was that moment when I quit my career, when I was home for about a week, where I said to my wife, I said, wait a minute, if I can transform 1 million lives one word at a time and get my son who really knows who he is and has
Right.
really has had some real success with internships and activities at Cornell. He's a senior this fall. I said to myself, maybe I can give back to people in a way where I know who I am now. It took me to like 48, 49 to figure out I was a catalyst. And what I did was I called a ton of my friends and a ton of mentors, and I thought they were all going to say I was crazy. And they said, you know what, you're onto something. And I was like, really?
Sure.
And that was it. He was the real, I mean, if I really give credit, it goes to my son because I don't believe that you have to solve world hunger to get ahead in life. I think you have to know who you are and you have to know your gift. And if you know this gift like a brand, I mean, Godiva, who's going to spit out the chocolate? But Godiva knows that it's about generosity. And Lady Godiva, that's her story. And people thought she was real. That's the whole other thing. They could not, they're like, she's not real. No, she's a legend. But it proved that when you tell your story, like my son did in his essay,
Right.
that is when the committee connects and they say, what are you bringing here? Like, what we're going to give you a diploma, we're going to give you a salary, we're going to give you a business. What are you giving us? And if
Sure.
you can articulate that, that's when I realized that nothing's for free.
Right.
And that is the moment when I put together what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years to help young adults just discover how that power of just knowing your personal brand, that core value in one word can help you score.
Right.
And so far, I haven't had anybody tell me to hang up yet, so I'm going to
Okay.
continue doing it.
Well, so the part that I like here is that, on top of defining this one word, right, and having this core value, the story that goes with it, because
Yeah,
I think there's tremendous value in storytelling, and I think it's
that's right.
underutilized. And I think a lot of people, I think most of us use stories. I just think most of us use poor stories. They're poorly constructed. They're not with much thought. But if you can take that step back and use this single principle and build around that. Lady Godiva is a perfect example. Your son
Yeah,
is a perfect example.
yeah.
So much more powerful when you put that foresight into it.
You know what? I'd love to just share one other thing with you listeners because
Sure.
I think this is really powerful. So when I'm on stage, I do an interactive with my audience where I pick brands. And one of the brands I pick is Starbucks. And I say to people, okay, audience, tell me the first word that comes to mind when you see the logo. I show the logo, Starbucks. Most people say coffee, but somebody always says, oh, that coffee's so expensive. And I say, oh, can you stand up? And then they're all like dying. But here's the reason why I love to challenge that person, because if you really thought about a cup of coffee at Starbucks for $7, rationally, you'd run out of the store.
Right.
But we buy with our heart. And the reason why you spend $7 is because Howard Schultz knew his whole story is about community. If
Yeah.
you read his book, everything about his father growing up and didn't have the company that he wanted to create, if you understand Howard Schultz's story, you understand that what you just purchased for $7 was community. You purchased the aroma, the chairs, the Wi-Fi, the
Right.
barista, the name on the cup. I mean, that's intentional.
Yeah.
And the whole audience changes when I share that story because you have to be intentional about your brand. And when you're in a Starbucks spending the day there, especially in college, you just paid $7 for all of that. And that
Right.
is when people realize, oh, so that's why you can command money for your core value. Same thing with
Right.
people. And so the reason that I'm really passionate about what I do, I don't think I can do this as effectively if I didn't have my career behind me. But when I share the brands and the reason why those brands are winning, it's because they realized they weren't selling the product, they were selling the core value. And
Right.
it's heart, not head.
Okay.
And that's really what I love about changing people's perspective about who they are.
Sure. So you said changing, and this leads into my next question, which is, does the personal brand change over time? Or is it, is it cemented? Like, this is my brand from here to infinity.
I love this question. Thank you for asking. Really,
Sure.
I get this all. Besides, what is a brand? I get the same question. Can your core value change? The answer is emphatically no. But here's the and that goes along with it. And I'm going to use Madonna as an example. Your goal is to reinvent your core value brand. Reinvent your personal brand. So you have to be adaptable. So Madonna is not going to go from irreverent, which is her personal brand, to being Miss Nice. She's not going to do it. But what she does brilliantly is she reinvents every 5 to 10 years as culture and the world shifts. And what you need to do is if you question your core value, you don't have the right one. But and that's why part of my program is we go back to your history. There's questions in there, like tell me some stuff, when you were a kid, because I believe you're born with this. By the way, this is a born thing. The whole goal is I extract it from your belly so that you never start that answer. Tell me about yourself by telling me what you do. The do is up here in the mouth. I'm moving it. But the answer to your question is absolutely not. You are always your core value. But if you don't reinvent and become adaptable, you're going to lose the game. You're going to be forgotten. And so for me as a catalyst, I came from the TV print world when I started my career in the lead.
Right.
I had to adapt and reinvent being a catalyst in the world of digital media. And I have to be honest, I almost did not do that. So part of my lesson to people is because I had to reinvent who I was, you have to do the same thing. So it's a great question. And the answer in my philosophy is absolutely not, but you can't not reinvent. You have to reinvent and be adaptable.
Okay. So reinventing is something that I think a lot of us are in the process of doing right now, from a business standpoint, as well as
Yeah.
an individual standpoint. There's disruption, right? We always try to teach businesses, be the disruptor in the
Yeah.
marketplace. And the marketplace has unfortunately disrupted so many businesses.
That's right.
What do you think is a good process for businesses to look at this disruption, and then look at their business? Because I think you're right. I think the brand, it is the fingerprint, right? You can change, you can do all of these different things, but it's still there. But how does a business look at the changing landscape and say, okay, hey, how do we evolve this core value in an environment that's completely different now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially, I mean, we're right in the middle of a pandemic right now, and the word pivot is, one of my best friends. That name. Here's
Sure.
the deal. Here's the deal. Your product is not your brand. Your brand is your core value, and
Right.
you use your product as the vehicle to drive your core value. So what I say to everyone and the clients I work with is, I want you to think of a bunch of gifts under the Christmas tree. Each gift represents a different channel, a different demographic, a different way to go to market, but they're all wrapped in the same wrapping paper, that wrapping paper being your core value. So the reason why core value is so critical and powerful, and I'll use me as an example, the day that the world shut down in March, all my speaking gigs went away.
Yeah. Right.
And so if my brand was motivational speaking, I would be done. But because my brand and my core value is catalyst and disruption about the way you think, I'm able to pivot to I'm launching a podcast very shortly, virtual presentations, coaching, consulting. And so what I say to people is we don't, especially entrepreneurs, we get so caught up in our product and we become married to it. But what happens is somebody's going to come along and is going to be cheaper, better, quicker. But
Right.
if your core value, if what you're selling and what you're selling is your core value, it allows you not number one to pivot, and number two, it allows you to understand that you're the person that's behind it. So
Right.
Sarah Blakely built Spanx on one word, confidence. Why? She wasn't selling $80 underwear. She was selling $80 confidence. And that's why she's able to go into bras, pants, bathing suits, and so on, because she's selling confidence using her products to do it. But
Sure.
if it's the other way around, then all you're known as is the podcast host, or all you're known as is the cookie guy. That's when people really struggle with their identity, because they're caught up in the idea that what they do and what their channel or their title was is who they are. So that's ever more why in this pandemic, I'm really powerfully communicating that it's your core value allows you to explore, go left to right, and go deep, because you're always going to be a catalyst. But how you manifest that gives you the long term marathon brand, as I call, versus a
Sure.
sprint.
Okay, so speaker, this is a disruptor of magnitudes that we couldn't have imagined. I've
Yeah.
been on the circuit. I've traveled so much events, all across the country. What are you seeing as events are evolving, and what do you think maybe the future of events is? And obviously you have a personal vested interest in these
Yeah.
kinds of things. So I'm just curious, what is it you're seeing in the landscape right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, coming from a brand perspective, I think events will absolutely be back. I mean, we all crave personal connection. We're all humans in the end. And really, I don't know anybody that I've spoken to that tells me they miss their car, they miss their, traveling. Everybody says, I miss the hug, I miss the person, I miss the
Right,
talking. But what I am going to say is, I think two things have really changed the game, which is actually a beautiful thing. One is, virtual is going to become a really powerful game right now,
right,
because you don't have to necessarily have the big conference. Maybe it's going to be small ones, little snackable snippets. But the virtual, I think people were resistant to it, because how can I connect when I'm on the computer? I think you're going to see a combination now of those two, which
right.
I believe is really powerful, because not everybody can make it, and I think it's
Sure.
going to open the doors for the bigger game. So I think it's going to take a while. I think we're probably in this for a good year, where we're going to straddle
Yep.
and be more on the virtual side than the speaking side.
Right.
But there is no question in my mind that the first big conference people have is, it's just going to be a love fest. It's
Right.
just going to be, people want to be, there's only so much you can do at the end with technology, when you really want to have that physical connection. And I mean, we all know we can't hug people, and that's like really hard. Or
It
we're
is hard.
elbowing people.
Incredibly hard. Yeah.
And I think what's, in some ways, it's, I mean, I have a wife on the front line, so it's really, this has been a real challenge for people in this world. But the way that I always look at this, and I look at this from a brand perspective, I tell people, as you get older, age is a gift. And also, look at the glass half full.
Right.
Like, there's so many, yes, there's no question this is a tragedy, of course, but like, we're going to come out of this. And how do we come out better? And I say to people, now's the time where, if you're not pivoting, pivot, try it, test it, because this is a good wake up call that
Yeah.
this is what life is, a pivot.
Right.
You know what I mean? And when I quit my career, I mean, everybody needs an act two. I also firmly believe in that. But like, at the end of the day, I didn't know this, but I literally took branding from brands, corporate brands, and just moved to people. I didn't know that. What I did was, I just got out there, MVP. Don't wait for it to be beautiful and
Right.
wrapped up in a bow. Those days are over. You have to get out, move, and improve. And I get on stages, and some of them I'm not that great, but I learn, and the next one I'm better, and the next one I'm better, and also help people. Like, right now, one of the things that's really important, and I love that you asked me this question, giving people stuff for free is not as powerful, because people are overwhelmed. It's the one-on-one call. I give away a link for a free call, because if I can get, out of 100 calls, I get one person that wants help, I win.
Right.
And they need the help. We need the hand holding. People need, can you guide me out of this? Like, you can't, not that giving them a course isn't going to help, but when you have 12 courses that people are throwing at you,
Yeah.
they're dying for the human connection. And by the way, that's what branding is. And that's why the entrepreneur is the brand. Just connect with a few people, and they'll be your cheerleaders.
So I'm with you in that I do think events are going to come back. I think
unfortunately, what we're seeing is there's pent up demand for this personal interaction, which is,
Yeah.
unfortunately going to exacerbate the time period. But I do think at some point when it's safe and it's right, I think demand is definitely going to be there. But I think that this is interesting. I had another guest on, and he shared his client. They had a big annual gala and they were preparing for it, and the client was devastated. And he said, "Well, yes, I get that, and that is unfortunate, but the good news is, you were only able to get 500 people at this gala before, and now, and you used a word which I love, snackable. I'm gonna use this, Rich.
Go for it. I came
Yeah.
from the
So
snacking industry. Go.
right. So he said that, hey, rather than having a, full day event, let's break them into snackable, portions. But now you can get so many more people to engage with your brand. So it's a tremendous opportunity. And one of the ways that, whether it's virtual or what we're doing right now, is it's through video.
Right.
And so this has changed the way that we are able, even though we're physically distant, we can still be socially close.
That's
And so
exactly
I'm
right.
interested from your perspective, what are you seeing and what do you think we're going to continue to see from brands using video? Because so much of what's happened in the past few months is it's internal. I'm sitting
Yeah.
next to a colleague and now I'm not sitting next to them. So I'm going to get on video and we're going to have almost the same experience. It's different and it's not quite this. It's not what we want,
That's right.
but it's inward. How should
That's
brands
right.
be looking to use video? And to your point, as far as we want to help people, we want one-on-one connections. How should brands look to start using video, looking out into the consumer marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that brands need to start doing is just get vulnerable, get real with yourself. Like
I like
the lid is off, and what I mean by that is, we resisted. Everybody resists things until they get confronted. Like
that. Right.
you don't work on your brand until you lose a job, until you lose your career. God forbid you have I have cancer. Life changed in an instant.
Yeah.
So what I say to people is get vulnerable, because the only way that consumers really connect with brands, in my opinion, is when they realize, oh, that brand is real and that brand
Right.
offers me something. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is there is such an opportunity for brands to now have focus groups like daily. Like,
Yeah.
get in front of people. I will tell you, I won't go into the detail, but I created a $100 million brand at Kraft Foods 15 years ago on one person's interview.
Mm.
And that's it. You do not. So the world is speed of light, world is going at a million miles an hour. We have to get over that we need 2,500 people to tell us X. If you have gut and intuition and your heart's right, because people buy humans,
Sure.
get more emotional, get more vulnerable, and get more connected. And you're allowed to, when I say screw up, like, it doesn't have to be the most perfect interview.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the most perfect situation. I will also say that one of the things I'm learning in my virtual speaking career that I'm trying to transfer over, be interactive. It may sound crazy, but ask the people on the other end, yes or no. Type in this. It makes a huge difference when you're not just listening, but you're actively engaging. And I'm learning that from my coaches, but I'm seeing the power in that. And
Sure.
so I would say if you're not embracing the virtual world, you are definitely going to be left behind. But if you're open to it now, which is totally fine that it had to come to this, but
Yep.
go for it.
Right.
Don't make it almost as equal as the stage. Don't make it as, oh, a secondary thing, because it's no longer secondary. I'm not saying it's 50-50, but it is definitely a new game. Real estate's going to change. Offices are going to get smaller,
Yep.
and I think that mental health's a big deal. I think that
Mm.
I would only say to companies as well, don't underestimate that not everybody is comfortable being home. Not everybody, other people have family issues and challenges.
Sure.
Check in on people, ask how we can help you, give people a little bit of latitude. I learned in my career, you give an inch, you get 10 yards. And if you work with people, and especially at home, if you save an hour with your children, you save 10 minutes. That's a bedtime story. You
Yeah.
will get back on at night. I've done that. Like, you give me
Right.
a little, I'll give you a lot. And I think people are starting to realize, oh, we didn't go down in efficiency. We actually went up, because
Yeah.
all people want in the end is just to work together and collaborate with one another. So I think this new medium is going to change people's perspective big time.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I would like to applaud you putting a focus on mental health. So, we as an organization, we are virtual, and we
Yeah.
have been. I went from a 15-year career in an office environment to working virtual about 2 years ago, almost 2 years to the day.
Wow.
And one of the things that was a big discovery, a big learning curve for me, was that there was a huge mental component to being in an office environment, and we use video, right? So it's not even like we were already doing these best
Right.
practices, but it was a big sweeping change. And so I think a lot of businesses need to be cognitive, that even though there's benefits to your point, and we are learning that there's incredible amount of efficiencies to be gained in this virtual world, but that there's people, right? There's people behind these efficiencies, and those people could use a little extra attention. I had somebody on, and she talked about the introverts that she has on her team, and
Yeah.
she's like, everybody thinks they're loving this virtual world, but she's like, guess what? Like, they need support too, even if they're not cognitive of it. And so they're putting emphasis on it. So I love what you're saying, because I think it's an area that we don't want to lose sight of.
It's interesting. I do a lot of free work to get paid. That's one of my strategies for growing my business,
Sure.
and I call it the Costco method because when people go to Costco and eat, they're
Yep.
not eating the Costco. The brands are not like, oh, let's feed Joshua today. They
Right.
want you to buy the product. And what I would also say to people out there, brands that are listening, just throw some promotions at your employees, like take a day, or like you
Yeah.
give a little, you get a lot. That's how branding. And I want people to start thinking like a brand, because brands don't make it to the top without giving away some gifts,
Right.
giving away their value. And if we think like that, you know what, a day off here and there, you're going to get so much more in the end. It's
Right.
just so I always say, act like a brand, act and think like a brand, because we all are.
Yeah, and that's good. And I'm going to just continue this a little bit further, because I think that I think a lot of business leaders think of their brand and they think of it outward.
Yeah.
But as as I've grown in my career, and you move into management, you realize that your customer is incredibly important. But so is the team on the front line that's
Uh,
interacting with them, and you should have that brand mentality internally as well. So yeah, give a little, get a lot kind of thing. Be conscious, because there's all sorts of things that you can do to boost morale, to boost just the positive mental space for your employee base.
It's interesting. I fully support the fact that once you know your core value as a brand, it's across every element in the marketing mix. And what do I mean by
Right.
that? This is why Starbucks, as a community driven core value,
Yep.
offers insurance, education,
Right.
benefits. That is the whole essence of a brand that really walks the talk. You can't just tell the consumer we're about community, $7 coffee, come in and buy, and then you treat your employees in a way that's not community driven.
Sure.
And I want people to really understand that when Apple's all about simplicity. Everything is simple down to Steve's wardrobe when he was
Yeah.
alive.
Right.
You have to, when you know this core value, like I can't be a catalyst and then all of a sudden be putting out content that's all about boring, or it's stuff that doesn't move the needle. You have to, that's why if you feel it, it doesn't change. That was your question before. Will if does it change over time? Absolutely not. And so I want everybody to think about that, especially in companies. When you're unhappy at a company, it's pretty much because the culture isn't consistent. And what the Weight Watchers CEO can no longer eat fettuccine alfredo in a restaurant on the weekend anymore. We're done. Those days are over, because she can't have 3,000 points and tell everybody else 2 points. So that's what I mean by like really owning your brand, because the phone has made everything so glorious, but there's a downside to that phone, and that is you can't hide anymore. And
Yeah.
so your employees are extensions of your brand. And that's why we're struggling as brands today, because our employees go out, we can't stop them, but you know what? They represent your brand. And if there's a
Yeah.
problem, same thing with athletes, same thing with endorsers. Like there's reasons why, because your brand is the perception, is reality, and you are the 5 people you hang out with the most. And
Right.
so that's what I've been touting as I'm out in the world today, because the digital's great. My kids love the digital media, but they don't love it when somebody's saying something about them because they're putting out something that is perception.
Yeah.
And if we can all manage that and it's a kumbaya, and I don't mean that, in a negative way, brands will win so much stronger. Get to that core value and what you're selling to people and bring it into your company. And I've been in companies, game changers, game changers.
Yeah, you mentioned Starbucks, and I had Howard Behar, former president there, on the show, and he was talking about culture. We our conversation was a lot about the Starbucks culture.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought them up because I think they're a great model. But he said he had this saying, and I want to apply it to brands. But he said, "You may not like the culture you have, but it's the culture you deserve." And as soon
Love
as
it.
he said that, I was like, "Oh my God,
Wow.
that's beautiful." And so I'd like to say the same line, but you may not like the brand you have, but it's the brand that you deserve. If we've got leaders and we are pivoting, we're reevaluating, we're looking at different things. What's the advice to an organization or an individual that says, "Hey, you know what? We do have a poor brand, or we have a brand that this really isn't who we want to be, or it's not what we want to be about." What's the recommendation? What are the steps we take to start getting the ship back on course?
Yeah, I'd say the first number one thing if you do anything is understand this, be the guide, never the hero of your brand. Most people, most brands that struggle are the hero. It's all about them. And you have to pivot that entire way of thinking and
Right.
ask, very simply ask yourself, like what you, one example to really bring this to mind, Build a Bear, amazing example. $100 bear, $100. Okay. Nobody needs $100 bear. So if you're really struggling, you got to say, what are we selling? What they're selling is empowerment.
Yeah.
You get to create your friend, empowerment,
Right.
$100. I spent a lot of hundreds there. But the reason, same thing with McDonald's, like you can't be everything to everyone. You got to take the step back and say, what are we selling? And
Mm,
what do we want to be known for? And then
right.
how do we gratuitously guide? It's all about being a guide. You're on stage, you got to give it to the hero is the audience, the
Mm,
customer. You make them win, they will tell everyone about you. When you're in trouble, it's usually because you're not articulating that change of guide versus hero.
sure.
So it really is about saying to yourself, go speak to your customers. By the way, I spent 25 years in consumer packaged goods. I can't tell you how many of us don't talk to our consumer. We
Yeah.
don't. Go talk to
It's a
them.
shame.
Right. And so I guarantee I worked on enough brands and enough people, you will find the consistent one core value across everything you're doing.
Right.
And number one, it's going to be easier, fewer, bigger, better, keep it simple. And people will say to me, but I don't want to say that 100 times. Well, that's why MasterCard is priceless. That's why Targets expect more, pay less. Like people don't want to be thinking 100 things about you because it's not
Right.
about you, it's about them. And so if you tell me one thing and say it well, if you're bored, this is my litmus test. If you're bored in a company saying something, you're working, it's working, because they don't want to think. Decision fatigue is like exponentially killing everyone.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you say it once, say it again, and say it one more time, because then the money's going to open. I mean, this is why Peloton's a $1 billion brand. Nike, all about greatness, greatness. They say you're great. If you think you're great, you're great. It's that type of understanding. Make it easy. And when you want to be poetic with everyone and you have 20 different messages, good luck. And so I say, be the guide on one core thing. Everybody has one thing they sell, and that's that core value. And honestly, I'll help you get there because I really have seen game
Sure.
changing brands understand that. So be the guide, never the hero.
Love it. Okay, so we've talked about a lot. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is important right now, whether it's what you're seeing or what you think we might be seeing looking forward?
Honestly, I'm really very happy with what we talked about. I'll just say a couple of summary things. Number one,
Sure.
people buy human connection. I mean, there's a reason why Super Bowl ads win because mom said it to us all the time when I was at Nabisco. I see that's me. I'm that person in the
Yeah.
commercial. We buy humans. So bring that human element to your game, number one. And then we just talked about be the guide, never the hero, which I think is also important. And the last thing I would say, and I say this to brands, but I also say it to people now that I work with them, nurture your future self. Nurture your future self. You have to think anticipatory ahead.
Like
You
that.
can't just live today
Right.
because I never thought I'd be 52, almost 53 this week. I never realized that, and I thought my parents were dead at this age. And now that I'm here, I tell my children, "You wanna get to my age and feel like you've got the path, you have the yellow brick road ahead of you. You
Right.
don't wanna wait and get here and go, 'What am I gonna do now?'" And so anticipating this future self just means mentors, reaching out to people, be a sage and a student. Like, don't be afraid to go ask people for some guidance. That's what mentorship's about. And so I say, people by human connection, be the guide, never the hero, and nurture your future self.
Love it. All good advice.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, no, thank you. I want to thank you for coming on because I think that there's a lot of personal takeaways out of this that I think people can be applying to their life. And to your point, you don't want to get to a certain place in life and be like, what now?
That's right.
We should be thinking that every step of the way. What is
100%.
next, so that we can put a path in front of us that it may not be there today, it may not be there tomorrow, but it will be there by the time that the timing is right. But it starts now.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I want to finish by saying I give out a free link to everyone that listens that wants to have a call with me. It's go.oncehub.com/Rich Keller. Once again, go.oncehub.com/Rich Keller. Give me a buzz. You can set up time. All I want to do is talk. I want to connect. I want to help people win. You never know what can come out of a conversation. And I just want to also say thank you for having me. This has been
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, of course. Well, we hope that this gets you a few closer to the 1 million people that you want to
I
influence.
got a lot. I'm launching a podcast in like 8 days. I got a lot of lives to touch, but it's going to keep me going, dude. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
You got it.